I'm Elex Michaelson. Welcome to The Issue Is on a week when so much of California is burning.
This is a monster. Who would go out with low humidity and high wind and the highest heat temperatures this time of the year and intentionally set the forest on fire?
Understandable outrage from Orange County Supervisor Todd Spitzer after a suspected arsonist adds misery to the already disastrous wildfires consuming our state. We'll look behind the smoke to see if the way we manage our land needs to change. Plus, Politics of the Week with our panel, author Caroline Heldman, podcaster Brian Goldsmith, and Fox News contributor Gianno Caldwell. And she may be only 9 years old, but after losing her father to gun violence, Nathalia Jackson has become a high-profile gun control advocate. The Issue Is starts right now. And thank you so much for joining us. More than a dozen fires are burning right now up and down the Golden State. The largest up to the north, the Mendocino Complex fire. Now the largest wildfire in state history. In fact, it's now larger than the size of Los Angeles. Here in Southern California, the Holy Fire appears to stem from an act of revenge by an accused arsonist now in custody. Let's go to the front lines of the Holy Fire. Joining us, Orange County Supervisor Todd Spitzer and Tang Nguyen, a spokesperson for the Joint Incident Command. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Spitzer, let me begin with you. You already had harsh words for that arsonist this week. He appeared in court today. What's your message for the person accused of setting these fires intentionally?
Well, unfortunately, he's only eligible for life without the possibility of parole potentially for his imprisonment, assuming he's convicted. I mean, clearly with fires year-round, I think this needs to be a death penalty consideration case in the state of California. But the fact of the matter is he's already shown that he's mentally unstable, and we have a new law in California, unfortunately, that allows for diversion of the mentally ill. He's probably going to be the test case for the assertion of a defense of mental illness. I'll be very, very surprised if he's even fit or found to be fit to stand trial.
And Mr. Spitzer just mentioned this idea of a year-round fire situation. Mr. Nguyen, Governor Brown talked about the fact that the projections for climate change for 2040, 2050 now starting to come true now. Is this the new normal, and how does that affect firefighting?
I can't speak for the projection, but for the last 10 years or so, it definitely has become the new normal. When I started with the fire service, there actually was a fire season that began during the summer and into the fall. However, now we keep our wildland gear on our fire engines year-round because you never know when you're going to get deployed.
And there are now a dozen fires up and down the state, crews battling 24 hours a day. It's 100 degrees outside in many of these places. How do you keep going? How do you sustain this from a resource perspective?
You know what, the bottom line is everybody that's out here truly want to be out here to help the communities that are affected. Nobody likes to see these fires happening, but they are happening, and it's a new reality for us. What keeps the troops going is that when we make progress, and you know, with social media the way it is, we're getting a lot of positive reaction from the public and very supportive of our efforts, even though it's taking some time. You know, we are getting a lot of support, and that's what's carrying everybody.
Mr. Spitzer, the president tweeted out about California this week, in some ways blaming California policies for what's happening here. Was that an appropriate tweet, and do you think that he has a point?
Well, I think he has a point about water supply. Clearly, we divert too much water out of the ocean under the Golden Gate Bridge because of the diversion in the Sacramento Delta. And the fact of the matter is we're talking about a tunnel to deliver more water to Southern California. So obviously we need water in Southern California. We're a desert on the natural, and we need imported water from the Colorado River to the south, and we need water coming down from the north from the Sacramento Delta. So when you take that and the lack of forestry management, that we haven't been cleaning our forests up, we haven't been thinning them out, of course all that fuel adds greatly to the ability to fight fire and the fact that fires are going to last a lot longer and be much more difficult to contain.
Well, one thing everybody can agree with, the firefighters are doing a tremendous job this week, and all of Southern California and all of California really grateful for your tremendous efforts. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the federal response to all this with Jake Levine. He's with us here in studio. Jake served as an advisor to President Obama on the issues of energy and climate change. Jake, welcome to The Issue Is.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be here.
A good place to start. The cover of this week's Economist magazine, it shows that we are, quote, losing the war against climate change. That comes as President Trump tweets this out, quote, California wildfires are being magnified and made so much worse by the bad environmental laws which aren't allowing massive amounts of readily available water to be properly utilized. It is being diverted into the Pacific Ocean, must also tree clear to stop fire from spreading. What do you make of what the president has to say?
Well, Alex, I think the one thing I want to do very briefly in relationship to that tweet is just correct the record briefly on what Mr. Spitzer said. CAL FIRE has repeatedly made clear that there is no shortage of water to fight these fires. And, you know, the president's tweet was, to call it misguided would be quite an understatement. You know, rather than addressing some of the policy initiatives that California has taken on as a state that's leading the fight on climate change, he goes out and blames the environmentalists and signals a problem that really has nothing to do with these fires at all.
So from a public policy perspective, what should California, what should the federal government be doing to actually deal with this?
Look, news came out this week that July 2018 was the hottest July ever recorded in the history of the state of California. We've had, I think 2018 is on track to be the fourth hottest year ever recorded in the state of California. It's clear that there is a trend towards excessive heat, drought, climate change, and what the state needs to be doing is continuing to fight for the types of policies the Trump administration has frankly been quite hostile to in terms of containing carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and addressing climate change. Right now, you've got a federal government that is affirmatively seeking to roll back standards on fuel economy for cars and trucks, that is affirmatively seeking to roll back the Clean Power Plan, affirmatively withdrawing from the Paris Agreement.
All right. Jake, thank you much for sharing your views. Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks.
Up next, we're going to talk about some politics. Should Democrats go more left or more center? Our panel is here. Gianno Caldwell is with us, Caroline Heldman, Brian Goldsmith. They're all getting ready. They join us when The Issue Is comes right back. New music from Shaka Khan as we look into downtown LA on this Friday. Welcome back to The Issue Is. We're joined now by a powerhouse panel of returning champions. Caroline Heldman is here. She's an associate professor of politics at Occidental College, and she's co-written the upcoming book, Sex and Gender in the 2016 Presidential Election. Congratulations. Brian Goldsmith is here. He's a lawyer. According to Twitter, he's a lover of dim sum, and he's the co-host of a popular podcast called Katie Couric. And Gianno Caldwell is a Fox News political analyst. He's worked in conservative politics and is founder of Caldwell Strategic Consulting. Welcome to you all.
What does Twitter say I love?
Yeah, what do you love?
I don't know. Whatever Twitter said.
Okay. Well, this week, another week of elections. We had the biggest election was in Ohio, a traditionally Republican congressional district. Had a very close special election race. It was one of several elections. It wasn't really a great week for Democratic socialists. Politico with this headline about Bernie Sanders. Bernie and his army are losing 2018. Many of the candidates he endorsed did not win. Some of the more establishment Democrats won. So one of the big questions going on in the Democratic Party right now is, do we go more to the left, more to the Bernie wing, or more to the center, like the Hillary wing? I guess 2016 continues. Caroline, what do you think?
I think anytime you have more extreme, whether it's on the left or the right, their role is not really to win elections, right? We saw that with Bernie in 2016. The role is to move the agenda. And Democratic socialists have definitely moved the agenda in terms of looking at universal health care and even looking at the cost of college and a variety of other policy issues. So they're doing their job, but again, their job's not really to win elections. So it's not surprising that they didn't do so well in these elections.
But Brian, isn't part of it also to get the base excited? And isn't this where a lot of the excitement is on the left?
Well, Donald Trump is fulfilling a lot of that role for the base of the Democratic Party. The reason that the Democratic candidate in Ohio did so well in a very Republican district is because of a suburban surge of college-educated professionals who were formerly Republicans or independents who were repulsed by Trump. And if the Democrats move too far to the left, they're going to alienate those voters whom they need.
Yeah, Gianno, as a Republican, are you concerned about a blue wave this year?
No, not particularly. I think it's too early for us to really delve into that. I think and we know historically, with a first-term president in the midterms, they generally lose seats their party does. So I'm not particularly concerned about that, especially considering there's been so much noise in the Democratic Party. As you mentioned earlier, what do they want to do? Do they want to be hard left? Do they want to be in the center? I think Maxine Waters is the face of the Democratic Party, who's really inciting violence when it comes to a number of these area. So I think it's going to be a very difficult thing for us to consider it to be a blue wave right now.
Well, the ingredients are all there for a blue wave right now. President Trump has about a 40% approval rating. The wrong track is over 50%. You have more than 40 Republican retirements in the House. Look at what the Republican politicians are doing, not what they're saying. They're leaving because they're afraid of what's coming. Yeah, so I'm very confident the Democrats are going to win the House.
But there's a 90% approval rating when it comes to Republicans. And with this impeach him speech, which I think is very real if the Democrats do take over the House, that is going to incite Republicans to go to the polls. They're going to want to support President Trump if he's that popular, and he is.
Yeah, and another thing that is exciting a lot of Republicans is this prospect of Nancy Pelosi becoming the speaker. That's something that's used in a lot of political ads, and which leads some of the more moderate Democrats to say they're not going to support her if they regain the House. So my question for you, yes or no, if the Democrats win back the House, will Nancy Pelosi be the speaker? Caroline.
Yes.
If she wants to be the speaker, she will be the speaker. She has never brought a piece of legislation to the floor that she lost.
Gianno.
She raises a lot of money for the Democratic Party. I find it hard that she wouldn't want to be speaker.
And should she be the speaker, Gianno?
No, they need somebody young and exciting, but at this point, she would probably be the person.
She's not the most effective public messenger, but she's an incredibly effective legislative strategist.
And I would agree. I think we only have these conversations about older women. We had the same conversation with Barbara Boxer, who was at the height of her power as a senator, and in fact, the party didn't support her. So I find that the discussions about Nancy Pelosi, who is incredibly effective at both raising money and whipping the vote and passing legislation, doing exactly what a speaker needs to do, I find it to be profoundly sexist.
Well, we're going to have more with our panel coming up next, including a look at the crime problem in Chicago. What's going on there and how can that be solved? Stay with us.
Somebody like you.
Welcome back. Crime this past weekend in Chicago, almost beyond belief. 74 people shot, 12 of them killed. No one seems to know how to stop it. Back with our panel to talk more about this, Professor Caroline Heldman, podcaster Brian Goldsmith is with us, and Fox News political analyst Gianno Caldwell is here as well. Gianno, just back from reporting in Chicago. We have some video of that. What were your big takeaways from that experience?
So I went to cover a protest on behalf of Fox News Channel, which was an anti-violence protest. And what I really took away from a lot of the residents, they were mostly black that were in the protest, they feel as though that Rahm Emanuel hasn't taken this issue of crime seriously. They believe that this is an individual, and if you see some of the tape, which is right in front of us right now, some of the comments were he has prioritized non-citizens over the citizens in Chicago, whose blood obviously is being spilled on the streets of Chicago on a weekly basis.
Do you think that there are takeaways, Caroline, for the rest of the city, for Los Angeles, that can learn from what's happening in Chicago?
Yes, I mean, I think when you look at gun violence, there are lots of different paths to it, right? So for white men who engage in most of the mass shootings, it's typically a grieved entitlement that they believe the world owes them something and they haven't gotten it. In Chicago and in Los Angeles and other major cities, it's mostly driven by gang violence. And if you want to understand gang violence, you have to look at poverty. You have to look at systemic racism. You have to look at limited economic opportunities and why it is that someone might join a gang and engage in violent activity.
And there was an individual that I interviewed in Chicago, Illinois State Representative LaShawn Ford, which Rudy Giuliani and a lot of other folks have talked about since then, who said we need President Trump here, not for a photo op, but we need some real solutions coming from the federal government that we can bridge the gap between the feds and the city of Chicago. Rahm Emanuel has rejected that, which is problematic on many levels because his solutions have been shown and proven to be ineffective, problematic, and for the residents of the city of Chicago, they're dying in the streets.
But this is a bigger
problem.
issue, right? This isn't just Rahm Emanuel. This is the fact that the NRA and the GOP's position is way out of step with the American public, right? So 9 out of 10 Americans want background checks.
We're talking about Chicago. Chicago's at the most comprehensive gun control laws on the books, and you still see people dying daily.
9 out of 10 Americans want background checks. 9 out of 10 Americans want the guns kept out of the hands of violent criminals. 8 out of 10 Americans
I think we all
want a
want
registry.
the guns.
We need
but
this
the interesting
nationally. It's
part
not
is
just an issue in
criminals do
Chicago.
not obey the law. What is it about that liberals don't understand?
Why outlaw
Criminals
murder?
criminals aren't going to obey the law.
Why should you outlaw murder? If murderers aren't going to obey the laws against murder, why should you outlaw murder?
Well, you need tougher penalties. Certainly you do.
Criminals
But
will always get their hands on guns, but the difference is, Gianno, like in Australia, when they did the gun buyback, they had an immediate 50% drop in gun homicides and 75% drop in suicides. And that's another thing we don't talk about. The fact that most gun deaths in the United States every year, the almost 40,000 deaths that occur, a majority of those are suicides. So this isn't just an issue of gun violence one-on-one or mass shootings. It is an issue that we need to address as a nation, and the NRA and the GOP are out of step with common sense gun control.
And an overwhelming number of the guns that are used in crime in Chicago come in from states with weak gun control laws, like Indiana.
Actually, there was a study recently done showing that there was a number of stores within the city of Chicago that were selling guns that were used in commissioning these crimes. So that's not necessarily true. The gun control laws we've seen have been purely ineffective, and we've seen that time and time again. City residents have fought the city of Chicago. You talk about McDonald versus the NRA, which said, hey, we want to have protection for ourselves, and that's what allowed people to have guns in their home. That was the difference. People felt a little bit safer, but obviously there's still crime on the streets of Chicago.
We're out of time. We're going to have to leave it there, but such an interesting debate, and I'm glad that we had it. Thank you all for being with us this week.
Thank you.
And up next, we continue on this topic a bit. 9-year-old Natalia Jackson is becoming a leading political voice on the issue of gun control despite her young age. She joins us when we come back. Welcome back. Our next guest is turning her personal tragedy into advocacy. 9-year-old Nathalia Jackson lost her father at just 4 years old. Kenny Jackson was only 33 when he was fatally shot during an apparent robbery at the family's cell phone store. Not long after the crime, Natalia made the decision to be a positive voice against violence. Since then, she's won numerous awards for her advocacy work, including for the group Justice for Homicide Victims, and has a budding career as a fashion designer and as an actress. Nathalia Jackson, welcome to The Issue Is.
Thank you so much for having me.
So even though your father died when you were so young, do you have favorite memories of him?
My dad is just my hero, and he was the first person I saw when I did come into this world, and I knew he'd be the man I love for the rest of my life, unconditionally though, and my father was understanding and caring and talented, very funny of course, and brave, and you know, he was a human. His life was valuable. His life was valuable because his life was responsible for making others smile. So that is a memory that I will always cherish.
And you've become an advocate for gun control. There are a lot of people who say, including some people on this show, who've said that gun control is not really necessary. What do you say?
Well, you know, a murder occurs every 22 minutes in the United States. On an average day, 96 Americans are killed with guns, per the data from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And according to the data from the Gun Violence Archive, a total of 199 mass shooting incidents have occurred as of July 30th. And this is not including the shootings that go unreported in our communities nearly every day, which is very disquieting. And I think enough is enough, you know, not one more victim. And I think that this needs to be stopped. And we need to pass gun laws that actually reduce gun violence. And we need to press members of the Congress to act on legislation by regulating the use of firearms. And we need to require background checks to each gun sale.
And your ability to remember all those stats is also very impressive, because I can't remember all of those.
I always educate myself.
Yeah, and you're also a fashion designer, right?
Yes.
And I think we have some pictures of that. Tell us about that and how that contributes to your advocacy.
Well, at the age of 8 years old, I found a way to channel my grief into something positive, you know. I found out that I had a devotion for fashion, such as sketching and designing and sewing. And so I started, and then I launched my first clothing collection, Naji, at the age of 8 years old, of course, and with the help from Dr. Kofa in the year of 2016. And it's always dedicated to my father, of course, but it is also dedicated to the kids who have been impacted by homicide. And Naji is derived derived from the Arabic verb to survive, which relates to my cause because I am a survivor. I am the survivor of a homicide victim, and I am the survivor of my father. So that definitely really is something that is meaningful to me.
That's beautiful. And one part of what you do also is you talk about living life to the fullest every day.
Yes.
and being happy in the
Yes.
life that you have. And I
Yes.
know some of your friends have put together a song all about being happy. That's your
Yes.
favorite song.
Definitely.
We want to play that as we get ready to end this show. We're listening to right there. So it's all about being happy, right?
Yes, definitely.
An important message. Thank you so much for
Thank you so
sharing it
much for
with
having
us.
me here
And
today.
thank you all for watching The Issue Is. We hope you have a very safe and happy weekend and have lots of fun.
Sunshine, everything right on time. Girls in our zone, feeling bold, and we're never alone. So